Hello and welcome to another episode of Pause for Payments. I am Christy Duncan and I'm so excited to have with me here today Debbie Guerrera, who is Executive Vice President of the Merchant Segment at ACI Worldwide. Debbie is based in Naples, Florida in the US, and I want to welcome you here today, Debbie.
Well, thanks, Christy. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today.
Today, we're going to discuss leadership and how good leaders engage and motivate their teams in today's very dynamic payments markets. And goodness knows, payments are changing like the wind these days, and it's such a really dynamic market. But I think for that reason, also because of the pandemic, good leadership traits have changed over the past year, given the extraordinary circumstances that we're all working and living under. So I'm really excited to hear what Debbie has to say about leadership in these crazy times. Debbie, let's start by getting your insights into what attributes you think make a good leader.
Right. Well, I think there's some very common attributes for good leadership that apply, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, and a real, truth that apply also across industry. I think first, a leader needs to be, I always think of it as a servant leadership type of role. You really need to be setting the example. You need to know how to motivate. There needs to be a level of openness, curiosity, and humility that comes with a strong leader. And I think, too, one of the probably overlooked characteristics is gratitude for what your teams and your stakeholders and the broader customers that you engage with deliver. And then I think cementing all that is the need for a really good sense of humor. And that sometimes is underrated, but the ability to bring people together and engage, particularly now in this more virtual environment, I think it also requires that human element and the ability to relate to others and be empathetic is very important.
Well, those are all really good points, Debbie. And I love that whole thing of the sense of humor. It's something we don't hear often, but I think you're absolutely right, especially in this crazy pandemic time when so much is so serious and so focused, and we have often more responsibilities on our plates because of family and work and everything kind of overlapping. It makes for a different kind of work than we knew, pre-pandemic. So that brings me to my next question, and that is the big part of leadership is communication. And we know that there are lots of different ways that we can communicate. Can you talk a little bit about what platforms today's leaders can use to get their message out?
Sure. I mean, I think, obviously, person-to-person communications is always desirable, but in the current environment, we've lost that person-to-person, in-person touch, and so we've had to accommodate, and whether it's the Zoom meeting, the WebEx meeting, the Teams meetings that increasingly are leveraging video, where before, very often on our conference calls, people would forego the video and just stick with the voice communication. So I do think that this ability to really tap into video to maintain that face-to-face contact has become increasingly important. And typical in the workplace, there's still email. Email becomes a continued communications vehicle, but that has also been augmented, and I've seen this quite a bit in our environment with instant messaging, whether it's through the corporate networks, it could be a Cisco Jabber or some sort of IM facility that allows for secure corporate communications, but that can facilitate it in a way that allows you to be more connected. And then increasingly, I also think that we're seeing more opportunities for use of, think of it as workspaces, right? And, so this idea of the intranet that folks relied on quite a bit has now become more collaborative, almost if you can imagine a Facebook inside the corporate firewall. And I think it also has opened up the opportunities, not just to drive, your standard corporate communications, but also to create communities of interest, centers of excellence, segment focuses, and, in a way for increased engagement and personalization of communication. So, it's the typical ways you communicate, but you have to do more of it now. And I think that's become something that we've seen the need for, is increased one-on-one communications, group communications across multiple mediums, right?
Yeah, that communication is so, so key, especially now when we don't get the water cooler chats or the after work drinks to connect on a less formal basis. It's almost like you have to schedule these cooler chats, and having those less formal communication channels like instant messaging, especially in a secure environment, are hugely important. And we have seen huge changes in the way that we work and the way we communicate over the last year. So I want to talk a little bit about your amazing career, Debbie. You've got a number of leadership roles and clearly have been quite successful to get to where you are. Can you share some of the lessons that you bring to your current role at ACI?
Sure. So, and I'm going to go back a few years. So I really benefited in my education from attending the United States Military Academy at West Point, and as one of America's premier leadership institutions that takes its graduates to become an officer in the United States Army. It really taught me a lot about how to work, with teams, with subordinates, with superiors, working across areas, developing a sense of urgency, being focused on the mission, but also understanding that what you're doing drives something more important than your own personal goals sometimes. And so that's something that has really stuck with me, to be a leader of character throughout my career, and really having an emphasis on integrity, ethical behavior, and how to engage well with others, right? And then over the years, I think one of the things that I've seen is, and this is particularly important for women, is taking the opportunity to show up, have a voice, and then push yourself to take on that next role, and whether it's expanding from a consultant to a senior consultant, or stepping up to take on responsibility for a new project, stepping out of your comfort zone to learn a new industry, to push from a marketing role into a sales role, for example, or a general management role when a P&L opportunity comes forward. So very often, I think sometimes women specifically are slow to take on and push for those new challenges, and we don't always feel ready. And I think that that you learn to lead better by pushing yourself, so that later you can push others, you can set challenging objectives, and that you can also relate to what your employees might be going through, based on your own experiences, right?
Yeah, indeed, indeed. All really good points. And I love that, find your voice and step up, because you're right. Typically, women don't step up. And I remember falling into that trap earlier in my career. And I thought to myself, if I do a really good job here in the corner at, the big bank, that someone will notice and someone will give me a promotion. Well, clearly that's not how it works. But, from my early career point of view, that's all I knew. I didn't know that I had to become the CEO of my career and really push my own career forward, look for those opportunities.
I think
Great
that's
insights.
a great observation, and and I think too that it's you have to take responsibility for how you push your career, but I think at the same time, as a strong leader, you also have to be responsible for how you build the talent around you, how you help others develop and progress in their own careers. And I think one thing that I've learned over the years is not to be ever fearful of surrounding yourself with people that are more talented than you. That this idea of bringing up and elevating the teams you work with, and how you respect and value their contributions and help them progress in their careers, it works well for everyone, you know.
Indeed, that concept of the rising tide floats all boats.
There you
So
go.
true. It's so true. So now we've been in this virtual working environment for a year, give or take. Can you share with us, Debbie, what leadership challenges you may have encountered in the last year and how you've navigated them given this crazy virtual work environment?
Mhm. I think it really has evolved, you know, during the year. And I think at the beginning of the lockdown and the pandemic, everyone was so concerned about keeping the business moving. And we were very fortunate, I think, in most of the payments companies where we were all able to work virtually pretty quickly and pretty effectively, right? Even for individuals that had been more grounded to an office environment previously. And we also saw that the demand for payments didn't abate, it shifted, you know, so the shift to e-commerce, the need to more rapidly adapt some of the payment methods that the existing customers needed to use. So the demands actually increased at the same time people were adapting to the environment. And my sense was in the first few months, there was a lot of focus on just keeping pace, being heads down, and we found many people really working more hours than they probably had been working previously. And then at the same time, trying to juggle being at home, having your children around you if they were homeschooling, having your spouse potentially working at home as well, and accommodating often home environments that weren't meant for homeschooling and two spouses working at the same time, right? And so I think that we started to see a shift about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic where other concerns came up, you know, which was how do you have a balanced family life? You know, were there strains showing up on some of the employees that where they needed more time and more ability to be flexible, right? And you know, and then how do you sustain that level of motivation when there was not clarity on when the situation would get back to normal, right? I think now, as people have gotten more attuned to how to balance it, we're seeing a lot more acceptance and comfort with the continued out of office environment, but also hope that some level of normality is gonna start showing up sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah,
But I think as a leader, what it's really focused many of us on is making sure that you give your employees the time to breathe, that you also are trying to help them through the balance that has to be achieved. But from the business perspective, you also don't want to lose that sense of urgency or that moment of opportunity to push the business forward. So it really does require kind of using one of my previous leadership attributes as a level of empathy on, you know, what your teams are dealing with.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's also true that no two people experience this pandemic the same. You mentioned a few situations having kids needing to do homeschooling, having to take care of elderly parents, having
Mm-hmm.
to manage in a small space that you normally would not be in all day every day with a partner or other family members, or having to do all of the cooking at home now that you can't go out to restaurants. I mean, so many different challenges that people are facing. And I think you're right, flexibility to manage those challenges. And maybe, I need to do more work in the evening after the kids have gone to bed, and less during the day so I can get them homeschooled because they can't get to school. So yeah, really interesting and good challenges for leaders.
Well, and, you know, I think it's also interesting because very often we're very U.S. centric, and so ACI is quite a global company, and so some of this gets exacerbated when you're dealing with a colleague in India or a colleague in Germany or a colleague in Brazil, and so some of the similarities of the situation are consistent. but how they show up individually may be different. And then the time zones you're working in, also vary. So there's also been a level of a global view on this that I think we've also taken into account.
Yeah, so that's another unique challenge that ACI faces is because you're so global. And managing over all time zones is not an easy thing. I can understand that as well. But you mentioned something about urgency, and I want to come back to that because payments is really changing faster than some organizations can keep up. And you at ACI, have to be at the leading edge of that. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us, how do you stay ahead of the pace of change? And how do you create that sense of urgency to reach the goals that you've set for yourself and your team?
Yeah, so I'll probably focus first on creating the sense of urgency and then maybe the broader challenge of keeping up with the pace of change. But I think as a leader, the business environment is very focused on, and particularly for publicly traded companies, is there's this rhythm of performance targets and performance and achievement that we're all driven towards. And I think it's very important to ensure that as leaders, we do two things. We inspect and we enable, right? And so that inspection doesn't imply micromanagement, but it does imply that leadership is aware of what's going on, that we're there to push when necessary, and that we're tracking how our objectives and our accomplishments and our teams are progressing against defined objectives. At the same time, that inspection very often will showcase where different decisions are required, different actions may be necessary, and help is required. And I think that's where this idea of enablement and empowerment becomes important, because it's not just enough to inspect, to identify an issue, but how can I help you? How can we move this forward? How do we help prioritize to what is most important to the business? So I do think this concept of inspect and empower and enable becomes really important. Now, the pace of change. Payments, one of the reasons that I think payments is such an exciting industry is because it's on this cusp of what's happening with, kind of digital enablement, rapid change. We're looking now at real-time payments, and some shifts away from the traditional credit debit card payments, as we've seen more alternative payment methods, coming into play. Pay in store has now been disrupted, not just with e-commerce, but, with payment facilitators and new delivery models. And, it's just everywhere you look, payments are changing. And so I think as payments professionals, it can be challenging to get in front of that and to know what's next and what's next that you care about versus what's next that you're exploring, and then, where your customers are going. And so, I think you have to create time to stay on top of industry trends, to read, to network. You have to listen to the customers. You have to do your market research and take advantage of even some of that intelligence that whether it's market intelligence, your product management teams, product marketing teams might bring to bear. But you have to find the time. But then it can be noise if you don't know how to cull it down to what's more relevant to the space that you're working in, the resources you have to invest, and then where you want to drive things. But I think the good news is we're in a rapidly changing industry that looks like it will continue to evolve, and that's exciting from a career perspective. But I think each individual in the space, to be relevant, needs to really understand and continue to inform themselves about what's occurring.
Yeah, it is a really dynamic market, but that's what keeps it exciting. If you can keep on top of it and keep ahead of that innovation curve and the customers' changing needs and changing requirements, it's a really exciting and fascinating place to be. Thanks for those insights, Debbie. I'd like to close today's discussion by asking a question that I ask all of the guests here on Pause for Payments, and that is, you've got an audience of rising stars from around the world. Are there some pearls of career wisdom, as I call them, that you could share with our audience?
Yes, and I think I mentioned one before is make sure you show up and have a voice and use your voice because, you know, you're, as individuals, you're powerful, you can contribute, but you can't be quiet, right? And it doesn't mean you have to show off, you don't have to have a loud mouth, but you need to show up. And so I think particularly for many women, that's something that we all need to work on. And to use our voices appropriately. So that would be, you know, that would probably be one of my top recommendations. And then second is, we spend a lot of time in our work environments, and you have to really enjoy who you work with. You have to be respectful of others, and you have to help everybody bring their best selves, you know, to the environment. And you know, and I think sometimes it's easy to get so focused in your world that you might forget about that. So, you know, show up, but show up respectfully and engage with others, right?
Thanks for that. I love that. Going back to a concept you mentioned earlier on in today's discussion about the servant leadership model of, you know, being very respectful of your colleagues and supportive and approaching them with humility and openness and gratitude for what they do. And I think in our day-to-day lives and work that we do, especially in this pandemic environment where we're under really extraordinary conditions, that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing you said resonates with me too, the have a voice. And that's something I think sometimes it takes people, especially women, time to learn. And I know it took me time to learn it,
Mm-hmm.
but once I did, then things started moving forward. And
Right.
it's something that we need to practice, but it will absolutely have a positive impact on our careers. Thank you for sharing these insights, Debbie. This has been a fantastic discussion. I love all of your perspectives. It's a great career journey that you've shared with us, starting right back to your military days and those leadership days. And clearly those leadership lessons have stood you well as you progress through your career. Thank you so much for sharing these, and we look forward to another discussion.
Well, thanks, Chrissy, and best of luck. And as you continue to connect and inspire women in payment, so thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you, Debbie, and everybody in the audience for listening. I encourage everyone to join us in the future for other online Women in Payments Pause for Payments episodes. And we've got amazing women leaders from around the world and around the world of payments. So thanks, everybody, for joining.